Welcome. We're so glad you're joining us again. And we had a friend the other day who had a diagnosis of osteopenia and was asking what she could do about it from a plant-based perspective, whether or not there was anything. And I thought, Bill, you had such a great explanation. I wanted him to share it with all of you. So here goes.
I'll see if I can replicate it. Okay. So basically, it's surprising. There seems to be almost an epidemic of osteoporosis in the developed countries these days. Low bone density, which means bones break more easily. Osteopenia is the term that's used for like pre-osteoporosis. So it's kind of at the low end of what's considered a safe bone density. And the way osteoporosis works is that the body stops depositing the calcium in the bones. So they aren't as dense, they aren't as strong. And what's interesting is to understand that bones, as much as they seem to be like bricks and mortar, it's like solid. Once you build a brick and you put it in your house, it's the same forever. But it's interesting to note that bones are living tissues, just like all the other tissues in our bodies.
Yeah, that really amazed me when I first learned that. I had no idea, but it makes total sense.
Yeah, well, think about it. As we grow, how could the bone grow with the child's growth if it wasn't a living tissue?
Yeah.
And because it's hard, it doesn't appear to be a living tissue like a soft tissue, like a muscle or an organ. But it is a living tissue. And what that means is that nutrients are moving in and out of it all the time. And it requires blood flow and it requires exercise and movement to be healthy like every other tissue.
And nutrients.
And nutrients, yeah. So the thing about the bone density is that calcium is what we're measuring as the bone density. That's what's showing the density of the bones when we do a bone density test. And what's interesting about the bones being living tissues is that calcium is always moving in and out. And the reason for that, and one of the things that's so valuable in terms of our bones, besides giving us structure and strength so that, our muscles have something to hang on and we have an arm to raise and push. And there's a great advantage to having the solidity of the structure of the bones. Another thing they do is they are like a reservoir of calcium. Calcium is constantly moving in and out of our bones. And so why would that be? Well, what's very important to the health of every body is the pH balance, the acid-alkaline balance in our blood.
Yeah.
So it wants to stay around 7.2. No, it wants to stay around 7.4. If it gets to 7.2, so this is a pH scale. pH scale goes from 0 to 14. I'm getting scientific here, but that's my tendency. So bear with me. I'll try and keep it simple. So neutral is 7. The body wants to be slightly alkaline, 7.4. If it gets to the acidic side, not even acidic yet, but down toward the acidic side to 7.2, we can actually die. Because that pH balance is so important to the proper functioning of all the biochemistry that's happening in our bodies. All of the biochemistry is designed to work in this environment of a pH of 7.4. So if that pH starts to change, some of the enzymes suddenly stop working. And so the body is very attentive to the pH balance in the same way that our bodies are very attentive to blood sugar balances. We get too much sugar, what can happen? I mean, we can die from a sugar overdose. But we don't, because as that sugar blood level starts to go up, the body senses it, puts insulin into the body, pulls the sugar out, keeps it at a safe level. So pH is something that we don't notice so much as we do like blood pressure, blood sugar levels and that, but the body is monitoring it just as fastidious. What's that word?
Fastidiously.
That's the word. As all the other systems that need to stay in a healthy range and a balance. So when the pH starts to get acidic, the way that the body balances that is to take calcium, to pour calcium into the blood, and it extracts that from the bones. And so it's like our bones are this reservoir of calcium, so that when pH starts to drop, that is become more acidic, it pulls the calcium out. So when we eat a diet that's high in acidic foods, the body keeps draining that reservoir.
And the acidic foods are animal, dairy, alcohol, sugar, coffee, caffeine, basically, free oils, most of them, artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, all these things are acidic. And what's interesting, what Connie just named was pretty much all the inflammatory food groups too, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's
they're
interesting.
one and the same.
So I haven't heard anybody talk about this, but there seems to be a direct link between inflammatory foods and high acid foods. So anyway, back to our science project here. When the body starts to get too acidic by eating too many acidic foods, or stress. See, that's another thing that creates acidity, is stress.
Yeah.
When the blood starts to get acidic, then the body just pulls this calcium in the same way that it pours insulin into the blood when blood sugar levels get too high, and it balances it, so everything's fine. But over time, if we've been eating a high acid diet, it starts to drain those reserves. So interestingly, the client that Connie's talking about was asking about the meds, because that's usually the first line of defense that traditional doctors give us. Well, we'll just, you can take this med, it'll build your bone density again. And we haven't been in favor of that, because from the research we've seen, what those meds do is they stop the calcium from being extracted from the bones. So I'm going to science here again. There are two elements in our bodies called osteoblasts and osteoclasts that put the calcium in and take the calcium out. So I can never remember which is which. But anyway, the one that puts the calcium in, we want that to keep working, keep building our bones. And scientists found, well, what if we just kind of stop the calcium going out? So they found a drug, a chemical, that would block that osteoclast. Let's say it's the osteoclast. I'm not sure which one it is. It would block the osteoclast from taking the calcium out. So when we take the bone density test, look at that. When we take this Fosamax, whatever the med is, the bones are showing up as being denser. But the thing about it is that they found that when people who are on this drug broke a bone, it was brittle, it shattered. It's like, it's like I'm looking at a little tree outside right now, and it's fall or it's actually winter, and so there's no leaves. But if I take one of those limbs and I try to break it off, it's flexible, but it will break. But if one of those limbs is dead, there's no flexibility anymore, right? And it just like that. And so it's like when we interrupt the natural functioning of the body so that the calcium doesn't move in and out, when we block the calcium from moving out as it naturally would, it's kind of like putting a dam in the river. We back things up, it gets stagnant, it's not alive, it's not flowing anymore as it's meant to. And some people I've heard even say it's kind of like having dead bones instead of live bones. It's kind of like that dead branch that just will break. It's brittle, yeah. So that's our take on the meds. We don't feel like meds are a good way to resolve it, because we've worked with a lot of clients who have had that same diagnosis. In fact, diagnosed with osteoporosis, not just osteopenia. And it turns around. Now, we've been preaching the laurels of whole food plant-based for years, and how this same regimen, the same food plan, works for high blood pressure, works for blood sugar or diabetes, works for
high cholesterol, arthritis,
pain,
rheumatoid,
all these things. Is like, how can it be that this one plan can affect all these things, and can it affect osteoporosis as well? Well, we've seen it work with hundreds and hundreds of clients. More and more MDs now are beginning to recognize it and also preach the laurels of the whole food plant-based diets, because we were listening to a research report this morning that was pointing out that people who were in the depths of heart disease and not able to walk up and down stairs were able to completely reverse that in a month.
Yeah, to
so
show
quickly.
Such amazing change
Right.
in their health by eating plant-based 1 month.
Yeah, for 1 month, whole food plant-based. And their cholesterol dropped like 100 points.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, how is it that this one plan can affect all these different systems? It's because it gives the body what it needs to function the way it's designed to function.
To regenerate.
To regenerate.
Which it's designed to do naturally.
So,
to repair and heal itself.
Yeah. So that works for osteoporosis as well. The one thing that we have seen in working with clients is it's not quite as quick as the changes we see in cholesterol levels or angina pain or the need for insulin if you're diabetic. Those things seem to change within weeks or months. So I'll tell you a story about one client we had who was diagnosed with osteoporosis and didn't want to do the meds. And she convinced her doctor to give her 6 months rather, and she'd have another bone density and see if it wasn't working with whole food plant-based. And so she went in, had the bone density. The results were kind of the same as they were before, showing that the bone density was below normal and she should be concerned. And fortunately, the client had the wherewithal to say, well, yeah, but weren't the results getting worse every time, you know, for the last couple of years? And the doctor said, yes. Well, so if they didn't get worse this time, but instead stayed the same, does that indicate maybe things are getting better?
Improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the doctor said, okay, well, we'll give it another 6 months. And sure enough, the next bone density showed an improvement. And so she continued going in 6 months at a time, and every time there was improvement. So it doesn't turn around quite as quickly as some of the other conditions, but the body will regenerate the condition of osteoporosis as well, in our experience anyway, with clients and from what we're reading on the web. So
give it a try. Try the whole food plant-based diet and see what happens over time to osteopenia or osteoporosis or any other condition that you may be dealing with. We love it. We've been eating this way 30 years and we just feel amazing. Now, food and recipe. It's your specialty.
Pumpkin pie.
Yeah, tell them about it.
I've always loved pumpkin pie. Thanksgiving and Christmas, pumpkin pie was actually, I think, a bigger treat for me than the turkey and stuffing and all the rest of it. And I haven't wanted to do the traditional pumpkin pie anymore. I find that the typical white flour crust and that isn't what I'm looking for, and a bunch of eggs and dairy and that and sugar isn't what I'm looking for. So I've come up with an alternative with squash, yams, sweet potato as the base, and a lovely almond flour. We make our own almond flour, just grinding up the almonds in our Vitamix, and dates, and a little bit of water, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So we'll show you pictures and the recipe below. If you have any questions or comments, please indicate in the comment section and we'll respond right away. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much.